Hi, my name is Anna Brown. I'm here to talk to you today about my assignment 8, which is titled Contextual Studies. This is part of my BTEC National Certificate in Photography that I'm doing for college. During this presentation, I'm going to talk to you about my latest assignment, which was my research assignment, my inspirations, the methods I used, how useful I found those methods, and also all the time considering research ethics. So my first task was to identify a research question. Once I did that, then I'd conduct primary and secondary research based around this. One of the areas in photography that interests me the most is photojournalism, specifically sort of war photography. And when I did my last assignment, assignment 7, I learned quite a bit about women's roles in war photography and photojournalism, and that kind of led me on to what I wanted to work towards in this assignment. I guess being a woman, I noticed that there was a distinct lack of role models within the photojournalist world. And looking around at exhibitions and stuff, there wasn't that many exhibitions that I could attend that were sort of targeted at women and featuring women photographers. Also, I've got an interest in equal rights. Being a woman, certainly like women's rights as well. Last year was a very important year, 2018. It marked the 100-year anniversary of women over 30 getting the vote in the UK, which was a massive milestone. So that kind of led me on to wanting to do something about women and about photojournalism. So the research question that I came up with was, after sort of much thought about it, I went through a number of options, and the one that I settled on was, does a photojournalist's gender have any influence over the final image they produce? So while I was researching this, I came across like an interesting photographer that's sort of one of my role models really, Lindsay Addario. She's an American, pretty much self-trained photojournalist. She started out in the 1990s when she was working in New York. She was photographing for the Associated Press. During her career, she's visited over 60 countries. Over the last 20 years, certainly she's covered pretty much every major conflict there is, and also humanitarian disasters in Africa, parts of Europe. Certainly covered wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria. She's got numerous awards and accolades. She was, in 2009, awarded the Pulitzer Prize for some work that she did with others for the New York Times. She's also been given the MacArthur Fellowship. Here on the screen are some of sort of the images, some of my favourite images that she's got of actual war. She doesn't really, as most sort of male war photojournalists will maybe capture combat. She tends to not actually capture combat scenes. She'll photograph things that are happening behind the scenes in war zones, and this kind of pictures that really. It's an interesting series that she's done quite recently titled Women at War. It's in the book that she's released. She's photographed women and their place in war today. Also, as part of my primary research, I visited the Don McKillen exhibition at the Tate Gallery. So an iconic British photojournalist. Certainly inspired me by doing this kind of primary research, actually visiting the Tate and seeing his photographs in real life. Sort of one of the things that struck me was how dark his photographs are. That's something that you wouldn't see if you were just to view it online. Certainly seeing it in real life really sort of highlighted the fact to me that when he prints his own work, he really puts his slant on it, and the darkness of the colour on the image just brings to life really the horror that some of the photographs that he's captured are. Being able to see the photographs in a series and read about his personal statements about his experiences in war zones, definitely sort of inspired me, and I wanted to see whether him being a man maybe would produce a different image to, say, a female photojournalist. With this primary research, that had many advantages. Some of the drawbacks, I guess, were the cost of the exhibition, which is pretty pricey now at the Tate. It's also quite time consuming, and I've had to put a day aside to travel out and visit the exhibition and come back, so at the time that I'd have doing that. Also, for my secondary research, I started that out by doing internet research, which I guess is kind of a starting place when I do most of my assignments. Certainly the benefits of this secondary internet research is that you've got access to millions of websites, it's free, it's easy to use, and as long as you're kind of careful about your search terms, you can pretty much read about anything you want. It offers massive amount of information. You can narrow down after doing sort of broad search terms. It gives you sort of ideas that you can then narrow down your search terms and look at more specifics of what you want to investigate. You also get to see lots of work from photographers that you might never come across. Certainly by doing this kind of research, I've learnt more about Lindsay Addario and others. The drawbacks, one of the massive drawbacks is it's kind of not governed, the internet, so anyone can put anything on there, it doesn't have to necessarily be true. So while I was doing this type of research especially, I was sort of aware of ethics, making sure that anything I read and cited from was from a credible source. I tended to use things like National Geographic, New York Times articles, Wikipedia. Although you can use Wikipedia as a starting point, I certainly then looked at where they'd cited it from and then went to that original source before I got my information, and only used information that I was pretty sure was accurate. This drawbacks, I guess, of internet as well. Some of it could be outdated. Some of the articles that I read might be 10 years old, and that's not really relevant today. The amount of information as well, it's just a huge amount of information out there, and it's being able to narrow down what you want, and that takes quite a lot of time. So although you don't have the time travelling to libraries necessarily and getting that information, you've got the time searching through the internet, but then once you've found what you're looking for, it's certainly a quicker and cheaper way of doing it. Another secondary research that I did was I read books, articles in magazines, and I found YouTube quite an interesting place to go. Listen to online interviews from actual photographers themselves. By doing that, you're kind of assured that you're looking at the person, listening to them speak, that you know that what they're saying is actually true. Also reading autobiographies. I read this book here by Lindsay Addario, Photographer's Life of Love and War. Just a fascinating book. In my previous assignment, I've sort of quoted some of the things that she said from that. Certainly gives you an insight into that person's life and their thoughts at the time. I guess the drawbacks, books are not cheap either, so knowing which books to read and which books to buy, and then what information you've got, also takes time to read a whole book when you might only be after a snippet of information. I guess with articles, the information that you get from articles, it could be out of date, might not necessarily answer the specifics again of what you're looking for. So my conclusions sort of from this assignment really, I was unable to answer specifically the question that I set myself, was does gender influence a photojournalist's final image? Sort of some of the things that I came up with, and I learned through my research, with that certainly men have a greater access to places and situations, meaning they can probably take more photographs than women just because there's more of them and they have access to other areas. There are fewer women photojournalists for sure. They still get paid less. In certain places they have less opportunities and access to where men might have access to. There's certainly a push though to change society's views and within the industry to get more women into photographing. Hopefully the public in general, certainly Lindsay Addario sort of found it quite sexist, some of the questions that she's been asked about how as a woman does she feel about working in a war zone when she had children. Certainly some male photojournalists probably wouldn't get asked that question, so that was interesting. There's certainly, the future maybe looks brighter. There's some exciting young female photojournalists coming out there, established people like Addario certainly speaking up and making the public more aware, becoming role models maybe for younger photographers out there. So yeah, I was unable to conclusively answer, but that just sums up